Thank you. I'm very happy to second the bill and glad to co-sign this bill, and you're very welcome into the Chamber, Minister Martin. So exposure to pornographic content at a young age can indeed have detrimental effects on a child's development and mental health. Various studies have shown the negative impact of early exposure to pornography on children. The American Academy of Pediatrics has noted that exposure to sexual content can lead to risky sexual behaviour and desensitisation to violence. Research from the University of Montreal found that it is associated with negative attitudes towards women and violence. Exposing the developing mind of a child in pre-pubescent and pubescent stages to pornography is the perfect conditions to create sexual predators and violent predators of sexual crimes. Notorious serial killer Ted Bundy, in one of his final interviews, stated that during his time in prison, he met a lot of men who were motivated to commit violence just like him and without exception. Quote, "Every one of them was deeply involved with pornography, without question, without exception, deeply influenced and consumed by addiction to pornography," unquote. This was in a time before the internet and social media. Although his account is anecdotal, we cannot ignore this shared behaviour amongst sexual and violent offenders. It is long established that those who commit sexual crimes are more often than not the victim of a predator themselves. Therefore, we cannot ignore the correlation and impact of sexual exposure in any form on the mind of a developing child. We have currently, in the care of this state at this time already, children that have been affected and that are highly sexualised and need around-the-clock care and attention from the trauma they have lived through or the danger they present to others. Additional studies commissioned by the European Parliament and the University of New Hampshire have highlighted the risks of earlier exposure to pornography, such as distorted perceptions of sexuality and increased risk of risky sexual behaviours. The Australian Institute of Family Studies also found that exposure to explicit sexual content can lead to desensitisation, distorted views of sex and negative attitudes towards consent and healthy relationships. It is crucial for parents, caregivers, educators and policymakers to be aware of these findings and to take proactive measures to protect children from inappropriate content. By understanding the implications of exposure to pornography at a young age and implementing strategies to limit children's access to such content, society can work together to safeguard children's well-being and promote their healthy development. Education, support and often communications about sexuality and media literacy are key components in addressing the impact of pornography on children and promoting their overall well-being. So I welcome this bill. I am glad to see cross-party support for it, and I hope it will become effective very, very soon. And I would urge you, Minister, to make this your goal, to drive this bill through all stages before this government finishes its mandate. Yesterday we became aware there were 33 children missing in this state. Some of them have been in state care. The last thing we want to hear is that these children have been victims of human trafficking. So please, I ask you, Minister, make this your goal to push this bill through before you finish your tenure here.
Thank you very much, Senator Keogan. I will now call Minister Martin to address the House.
Gurb Magat as an deis an tábhar ríhabhaach seo a phlé agus gaim buchas leis an Senator Mullen agus leis na co-urathirí as é a ardú. I thank Senator Mullen and the bill's co-sponsors for raising this important issue. I will not be opposing this bill. The intention of this bill is to prevent children from accessing pornographic material on the internet. As a parent, I am aware and share concerns regarding children accessing inappropriate and harmful online content. As the Minister with responsibility for media, online safety is a key priority for me. I brought the Online Safety and Media Regulation Act through this House with significant input from many senators here, which was welcomed by stakeholders and particularly children's rights organisations like CyberSafe Kids and the ISPCC. This landmark legislation is central to creating a robust legislative framework. It was through this Act that the independent regulator Comisiún na Meán was formally established just over 12 months ago. Online safety is a key priority of mine. In fact, it is a key priority of this government. In particular, it is this government's and my priority to ensure the protection of children online. This includes protection from age-inappropriate content like pornography, and it is for this reason I will not be opposing the bill today. However, it is important to state that there are a number of significant legal and technical issues with the bill's approach to addressing this matter. I think the main issue is that the bill does not set out any role for Comisiún na Meán, Ireland's online safety and media regulator. And Comisiún is at the heart of Ireland's online safety framework, which is built around the recent landmark legislative measures of the Online Safety and Media Regulation Act, the Digital Services Act and the Terrorist Content Online Regulation. The online safety framework requires online platforms to put in place systems and processes to reduce the availability of harmful online content and address access to age-inappropriate online content. It puts the onus on these platforms to ensure their services meet their obligations, and there are severe penalties, up to and including criminal sanctions, for non-compliance. It is important to note that Ireland is not alone in building this online safety framework. It is interwoven with related robust EU measures, and this is important because Ireland alone cannot make the internet safer for children. We must do it together in collaboration with our fellow EU member states and with the European Commission. Since I was last in the Seanad on online safety in April of this year, Comisiún has published a revised draft of its online safety code, which it intends to adopt later this year. And I see this as a major positive development, and I want to commend Comisiún for the work it has undertaken to date to create a safer online environment. Crucially, the code will be binding and will focus in particular on ensuring the safety of children from harmful online content. It will oblige video sharing platform services established in Ireland to protect children from harmful and age-inappropriate content like pornography. This also encompasses a wide range of other content, including serious cyberbullying, racist and xenophobic material, and material that encourages or promotes eating disorders, self-harm or suicide. The measures these video sharing platform services must take to deliver on this protection for children include the operation of age verification systems, which itself includes age assurance measures. The measures taken must be proportioned to the content and to the type of content permitted on particular services. So, for instance, those designated services that allow pornographic material to be uploaded by users must operate appropriate age assurance mechanisms to ensure children cannot encounter this type of material. The online safety code will also provide for requirements around the operation of content rating systems, parental controls, and effective reporting, flagging and complaint mechanisms. These measures will further safeguard children against harmful and age-inappropriate content such as pornography. Once the code is applied, it can be enforced by Comisiún, including through significant financial penalties of up to €20 million or 10% of turnover. In addition, continued non-compliance can lead to criminal sanctions for company directors and senior managers. It is important to note that the services in scope of the Online Safety Code are limited to those that are established in Ireland for the purposes of the European operations. This therefore includes services like X, Reddit, Instagram and YouTube. This limitation is in place because the Online Safety Code implements the EU's Audiovisual Media Service Directive. Enshrined in the way the directive works is the country of origin principle. It means that services are regulated in the EU member state of establishment. The concept ensures a coherency of regulation, making it easier for services to operate across the EU while also ensuring widespread compliance with these regulatory standards. So, for services that are established in another member state, it is the responsibility of that member state to ensure that platform services are subjected to the standard of regulation set out by the directive. 3 websites are regularly mentioned in this area: Pornhub, Xvideos and StripChat. These websites are not established in Ireland and therefore are not regulated by Comisiún in terms of the Audiovisual Media Service Directive and the Online Safety Code, but by the relevant regulator in their EU member state of establishment. This does not mean that these websites aren't regulated in the EU. On the contrary, Under the Digital Services Act, the most stringent of its obligations apply to very large online platforms and very large online search engines. And the 3 websites I mentioned before, Pornhub, Xvideos and StripChat, are designated as VLOPs. The European Commission enforces the DSA in respect of VLOPs and VLOSs with the support of the network of digital service coordinators across the EU. An Comisiún is Ireland's Digital Services Coordinator, which gives assurance in terms of seamless regulation across the various legislative measures. Under the DSA, platforms must complete risk assessments and take effective measures to address any identified risk of exposure of children to inappropriate services, including by means of age verification or age assurance. The European Commission has already requested information from the 3 named websites on these particular issues, in particular on the age assurance mechanisms that those websites are operating. The penalty for non-compliance with the Digital Services Act are up to 6% of global turnover. Separate to the code, it is important to note the work of the Youth Advisory Committee, an advisory committee established by Comisiún Naman on foot of a requirement in the Online Safety and Media Regulation Act. It is important that young people who are impacted by harmful online contact have a voice. This was a useful suggestion from the Seanad, and I was happy to take it on board and include it in the legislation. The committee comprises representatives from 9 national youth groups, including the Children's Rights Alliance and Cyber Safe Kids, along with 9 individuals under the age of 25. As is also required under the legislation, and Comisiún consulted with this committee during the development of the Online Safety Code and also briefed the committee after the revised draft was published. There are also a range of non-legislative initiatives being taken at EU level in this area, such as the EU Task Force on Age Verification, which is working on practical guidelines on how the age assurance measures and Better Internet for Kids strategy, which aims to produce a code of conduct on age-appropriate design and an age verification toolkit. It is important that we continue to contribute to these initiatives to ensure better online safety measures. In the discussion of this issue, there has been a mention of the measures. In the wider discussion of this issue, there has been mention of measures that some US states have introduced or are in the process of introducing age verification measures to access pornographic websites. In response, I understand that some of those websites have withdrawn from those US states. The legal and regulatory environment in the EU is very different to that of the US. The US has no online safety regulator or statewide online safety legal framework. This means individual states can act independently in this respect. We have online safety legislation that applies across the EU, enforced by the European Commission and by independent regulators in each member state. This means that Ireland cannot act unilaterally, nor should it. For example, I understand France sought to implement their own national legislation on age verification and age assurance, and the European Commission has notified them that such laws would be contrary to the DSA. It is my view that participation in a unified and coherent EU approach, as Ireland is doing, and working with the European Commission, we will bring all the platforms, including those named platforms, to account, and we will achieve the aim of protecting our children from age-inappropriate content. Moving to the Senator's bill itself, I wish to address some of the other legal and technical issues. Firstly, there are potential legal conflicts with the country of origin principle, a concept I've already mentioned. The principle is long established under European law and strongly supported by Ireland and committed to in our national digital strategy. The bill, however, seeks to impose obligations on online services that are established in other EU member states and therefore undermines this principle. Recent decisions by the Court of Justice of the European Union on similar issues have been in line with this principle, and the European Commission would likely strongly object to any effort to breach it. The bill also appears to provide for ministerial powers to create regulations to supplement the bill's provisions. On first examination, I would be concerned that there is insufficient legal basis and a lack of appropriate limits set out in the bill. These provisions also fail to consider the statutory role and regulatory independence of Comisiún Naman, which is a requirement under their Audiovisual Media Service Directive, the Online Safety and Media Regulation Act and the Digital Service Act. And these issues cannot be ignored, no matter how important the policy priority. Other provisions of the bill do not appear to be sufficiently clear in terms of the obligations that are to be imposed. For instance, Section 2 simply states that a website or application that is accessible on the internet containing pornographic material shall not be accessible to children in Ireland. Given the proposed potential offences, further clarity would be of benefit and probably necessary. Those offences are connected with requirements under Sections 2 and 3 of the Bill, but appear to conflict with the liability exemptions under the Digital Service Act. Under the Digital Service Act, hosting services should not be liable for specific illegal content made available by a user, as long as the service does not have knowledge of the illegal content and, once it becomes aware of it, works expeditiously to remove or disable access to it. As mentioned, the offences appear to conflict with this article. To conclude, I agree with Senator Mullen that we need to tackle the accessibility of age-inappropriate online content for children, and in particular pornographic material, and for this reason I am not opposing the bill. It is also for that reason, the importance of protecting our children, that this government has put in place a new online safety and media regulator, supported it in recruiting additional staff, and prioritised significant legislative measures to give it teeth. Just yesterday, the Digital Service Levy Bill was debated here and completed its passage through the Houses. This legislation will enable Comisiún to support its role by levying industry in respect of its functions. This is vital to ensure Comisiún can effectively fulfil its function of keeping our children safe and ensure platforms pay for the cost of regulation. But nevertheless, I do not oppose the bill today, and I thank Senator Mullen and the bill's co-sponsors for raising the issue. Gurth míle maith agah.